Good afternoon, or a good morning, or good evening, whenever you're watching, wherever you're watching. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Future Journalism Today Live. Nadine is here again. Hi, Nadine.
Hi, Lawrence. Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, and we have a very special guest, and let me show you. It is Greg Emerson, and he will be joining us in a few short moments. Nadine, could you tell us what people can expect today? But first, please use the chat and say hi wherever you are, the newsroom maybe you're affiliated with. And during this entire live show, you can ask questions to our main guest, Greg, and let's bring him on. Hi, Greg.
There it is.
Hello, everyone.
Good
Hi,
morning
Greg.
to you, I believe, right?
I'm sorry?
Good morning to you, because it's morning still where you are.
Close enough. Yeah, it's about noon here in New York, or in Maryland where I am. But yeah, I live in New York. We are right in the middle of the workday, but very happy to be here.
Well, great to have you. I was just
Thank you
telling
very
the
much for
audience,
joining.
that Nadine is going to tell us what we can expect during these next 45 minutes or so. So please, Nadine.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lawrence, for having me again. So today we are going to talk to Greg Emerson. So Greg, thank you very much for participating today again. Before we are going to start with everything about you, just a little sneak peek for everyone joining us, what we are going to talk about today. So first of all, of course, we are going to talk about Greg and with him, about his career and everything he has done in the past. And second of all, we are going to ask him to unbox a tool or to show a tool that he is using for his everyday work life. Then we are going to ask him for advice, what journalists should stop nowadays when they are working. And at last, we are going to have the live Q&A. So everyone, if you have any kind of question, please feel free to share it in our chat and to participate in the session, because that's very important for us to talk to you as well. So, okay, that's about it about the session today, about these 45 minutes. Greg, I'm going to introduce you a little bit. Please feel free to intervene if you have anything to add. Yeah, let me start right now. So as you can see, Greg is working for The Atlantic. He is the executive director of product there, which means that you oversee the end-to-end story experience from authoring tools and article. Yeah.
Let me see. Can you show it again, Greg? Is this the latest edition?
This is the latest issue of The Atlantic. Yeah, it's a print magazine. Of course, I am involved in the digital side, but always love reading in print as well. So I really value having the physical object in my hands too.
Great.
That's wonderful. I'm going to talk about The Atlantic and a little bit about its history as well in a minute. But beforehand, I'm going to explain what you do on your day-to-day basis. So as I said, you oversee the end-to-end story experience from authoring tools and article page templates to reader-facing touchpoints across all platforms, as well as your mobile apps, newsletters, and homepage strategy. And now about The Atlantic, the short excursion to the history of The Atlantic. As you've just shown, it started as a magazine and it was founded in 1857 in Boston, which is crazy, you know, a really traditional media outlet in the US. So it's a magazine or a journal of news, literature, and opinion. You have, or you are one of the oldest and most respected outlets in the USA. I think I can definitely say that. And when The Atlantic was founded, there has been a mission statement that is still one of the core principles of your medium. So, for example, reason should always guide opinion. The knowledge you have about the world is partial and provisional, etc. It used to be a monthly publication. Now you're releasing 10 issues a year. And of course, you maintain an online site. Your offices are in Washington, D.C. mainly, but as I just heard, you are working in New York, right?
Yeah, certainly COVID has made all of us work remotely, but we split our headquarters. So the main headquarters in Washington, D.C. historically where most of our reporting content and reporting staff has been. And then we have an office in New York as well, because there are quite a few people on the digital side who are based in New York. So there's an office space there too.
Yeah, of course, makes totally sense. So to continue with your career beforehand, you've been the head of product at Huffington Post in the US, where you led strategic planning and oversaw all of Huffington Post's digital products. There you worked on the launch of the brand's first membership program, Huffington Post or HuffPost Plus, so paid content, which is of course interesting for a lot of European journalists as well. I think for everyone actually. You've been a mobile product manager for the Wall Street Journal, where you oversaw feature development for mobile apps, for example, push notification strategy and mobile messaging. And you've worked as a deputy editor and head of emerging technologies of Newsday.com. And now, in your free time, you're hosting a podcast called Peace Corps Stories. Peace Corps Stories, the unofficial podcast, which is of course super interesting because I'm podcasting as well. Yeah. So you've been a Peace Corps volunteer in the past as well. You've lived in Morocco and in Peru. And one very, very interesting fact I read about you on the website of the Real Time Academy was that you've eaten 10,000 potatoes in 2 years, and you've even kept a spreadsheet about that. So, Greg, my first question for you today is, did you ever eat a potato again afterwards?
Oh, well, you know, I was blessed to be, and for those of you who are watching who don't know about the Peace Corps, it is a US government program that sends folks to countries where they are invited to help with development work, basically living in a community and working with that community to help them, improve on whatever outcomes they're interested in. I was fortunate. Well, I was sent to Morocco initially, but terrorism in 2003 caused that program to get canceled for a while. So I was reassigned to Peru, and I was very lucky to have been reassigned to Peru. First of all, because I love the mountains, but second of all, because I love and have always loved potatoes. So, you know, when you're living in a small community, at least where I was, it was quite a poor community. There weren't too many resources, but there were a lot of potatoes. It was a potato farming community primarily. And I learned very quickly that most meals were going to be a bowl of boiled potatoes, sometimes with some sauce, depending on what we had lying around, sometimes just with a little bit of salt, and sometimes with nothing at all. So when that became clear to me, the product nerd in me, the spreadsheet nerd in me activated. And but this was in 2003. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I did not have a computer while I was there. I had a Nokia cell phone that was issued to me by the Peace Corps. So this was an old school spreadsheet. I had a notebook that I turned into, columns for every, a page for every month. The whole notebook was my spreadsheet, and I just started keeping count just as a curiosity. And in general, I've always kind of been interested in like the quantified self and what do I look like expressed only in data. So it was not a chore at all. It was just something I was naturally kind of inclined to do as a way to pass the time, I guess.
It was something I was wondering, Greg, why you were keeping track of your potato consumption, because I think another important principle of The Atlantic is ideas have consequences, right? So what kind of consequences did this idea have?
Well, the most interesting takeaway was that at the time, the Atkins diet, the no carbohydrate diet, was very popular at the time. And so my diet was pretty much the exact opposite. I was eating nothing but carbohydrates and, not so much in the way, I could get protein and I could get fruit sometimes when I went into town, but mostly it was potatoes. And I lost a lot of weight. And my body was adjusting to that diet and just that the nutrients available to me. And so I ended up losing, maybe like 15 kilos in the first few months. In the first 6 months that I was there, I was really light. It was actually not great. It was just kind of dangerously thin, or at least like thinner than I had been in many years. And so I thought that was kind of ironic that my opposite of Atkins diet actually helped me lose a bunch of weight. But as I said before, I love potatoes. And the amazing thing about Peru one of the many amazing things about Peru is that there are like 10,000 varieties of potatoes there. And I don't know how many exactly, but there are a ton of potatoes that I've never seen anywhere else. So really just...
Do you have a good resource for people to go that I can put in the chat so that they can look up the other potatoes? Which
I will find one.
I want to address the viewers that just tuned in. You're not watching a potato YouTube show, but a show with our special guest, Greg Emerson. And as you can see down below, it says Executive Director of Product at The Atlantic. And our first question, obviously, is what does a Executive Director of Product do at The Atlantic or maybe at other places? Could you please elaborate, explain what you do in your day-to-day job?
Yes, I would love to. I started at The Atlantic last year, and what a magnificent experience it's been. The product organization at The Atlantic is organized into pods, and I had never personally worked in a pod structure. I had, of course, heard a lot about it, and our work is organized so you have each pod has its own team of engineers and at least one product manager. And then we work with a cross-functional team of designers, researchers, data scientists who kind of float and work across all the pods. So we have one pod focused on advertising and ad products, one on subscription conversions and subscriber growth and subscription technology. We have one pod that's all about our infrastructure and tech, and the pod that I oversee, which is broadly called Reader Experiences, which technically includes two pods. One of them is the Story Products pod, which was brought together with a very specific mission or area of focus, which is the article page. The digital article page has replaced the brand's homepage as, you know, that first point of contact for the vast majority of our readers. So many people are coming to us via links, either in email, or maybe someone sends them a link on a chat app. Maybe they're finding it on social media. So many people are coming straight to our article page that pod was kind of brought together to ensure that our article page is performing well, that we're trying new things with storytelling, and that the technology is supporting all the editorial goals that our awesome journalists have. So that is, you know, the one component of reader experience. And the other component is a newly formed, we are only kind of starting this pod, and it's called Habit. And that was a strategic reflection of the fact that, you know, it's important these days not just to produce good journalism and distribute it to folks, but give them such a great product experience that they keep coming back. And becoming a part of someone's daily or weekly media diet is kind of the best sustainable way to keep and grow your audience. So as a contrast, like when I was at HuffPost is very much a breaking news organization following a lot of trending topics. HuffPost got a huge amount of traffic and had so much success in bringing in audience, you know, sometimes different audiences every day based on what was going on and what they were covering. But we weren't so much oriented toward like, what can we do to completely just maximize that return behavior, that habit creation. The Atlantic has prioritized that strategically. So, you know, this was my leadership who kind of set up this structure and laid the groundwork for the Habit pod, but it includes newsletters, homepage strategy, as you mentioned earlier. It includes our iOS app, and we'll be working on an Android app this year as well. So expecting another product to come into that portfolio, and then work with like our crossword puzzle. Is included in there, crossword puzzle, which is a great habit forming kind of counter programming thing that we offer. And then podcasts, again, an experience that with regular publishing, and you kind of you build an audience and maintain that consistent habit with you know, people listening when you have new episodes available. So all of that together encompasses like the way we present our journalism to people, whether it's on our own platforms or something like an email in your inbox or a podcast on your Spotify app. So there is connective tissue through all of that, which is how do readers experience our journalism? And my day-to-day involves overseeing those teams. So I have a product manager who is kind of the point person on the Story Products pod. She is working day-to-day with all of the engineers, making sure we're working efficiently, planning well, and kind of always having meaningful work for them to do. And then in the Habit pod, I have a product manager who's leading that effort, and he is also, working with a cross-functional group of stakeholders to kind of manage all those different priorities. And as you can imagine, a group that has numerous products as its mission, there will always be a bit of a competition between where, among those products for where you put your focus and where you put your energy. So lucky that I got
you sort of trying to balance and figure out how the competition, how it sort of.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah. I my role is, I see myself as kind of planner in chief in a way. Just, the product managers I'm working with are fantastic. So they make my job a lot easier, but it's really just kind of helping make sure at a high level that we are looking far enough ahead. We are planning for future initiatives. We're making sure that, we want to be very transparent and communicative with the rest of the stakeholder teams within the Atlantic. So it's really about making sure we are sharing our work and showing our process and making sure we're early enough so that we can get approvals on some of the things that we want to do in a couple of months, which means we have to be planning them now. So I sort of try to bring in like a little bit of high level coordination, but really just making sure we're hitting the right milestones at the right moments and ensuring that we're working efficiently and that no time is wasted.
Okay, well, thank you for sort of elaborating a bit more on what you do on a day-to-day basis. I was looking at the comments, and there are two viewers that say hi. Bridget Dooley, I'm Bridget viewing from Amsterdam. Bridget. Hi, Bridget. Nice. And Anne Mariah, which is our biggest fan. I think she watches every episode. Hi from Amsterdam. It's a national daily newspaper. So hi, Anne Mariah. And
one of my favorite cities of Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
Mine too.
Yeah,
absolutely, great city.
So, Greg, I hear you were talking about cross-functional teams and connective tissue. Does all these things sort of organically grow, or do you research on how to build teams or what you put your focus on? Could you tell a bit more about the process of organizing all these pods and teams?
Yeah, that is a challenge. Managing organizational growth is, I have been in the middle of that a couple of times. I mean, I think anyone in digital media in the last few years has experienced the fact that the only constant is change, as they say. And so, teams restructuring and a lot of companies having layoffs, which I've been a part of as well, and affected by. And then, reorganizations, because it's a transitionary time where some old ways of doing things, or the idea of like focusing on your print product first and then digital later, is kind of common for legacy newsrooms. Not one that I've experienced at the Atlantic. So, I'm happy to say that like the hard work has been done for me. The leadership, our vice president and SVP of product at the Atlantic are just great organizational minds, and really helping to ensure resources are in the right place, and kind of looking at it as a living, breathing arrangement. I think that's one of the keys is, managing your team and its growth and some of that organizational change. It touches on a lot of the same things we do with product management in general, which is to say, try to figure out what the needs of everyone involved are, and then, set up or deliver an experience, but then always be looking to continuously innovate and optimize if things aren't working or wherever there's friction. Managing growth is tricky. So we are in a growth mode. We're hiring on the product team right now. We're hiring on our growth team. We're hiring on our design team. So I think all of us are conscious of the fact that, it used to be a smaller team that was very, very interconnected. And as we're growing, we're definitely spending a little bit more time than we used to, ensuring that we have enough touch points among product managers and among the leads of these pods, so that we're doing very collaborative road mapping, we're doing very collaborative goal setting. And again, good leadership helps this process along so much. So key for me is like not to get too married to any particular structure, but always be flexible and realize like there are some projects where, we might need to collaborate 50-50 with another group. And of course, there will be some projects where we're kind of self-contained and it's only our group working on them. But the spirit of collaboration at the Atlantic is really impressive. And it is such a healthy work environment. And we have, you just need to carve out the space. And I'll say also a plug for another role that we have that the Atlantic is invested in, which is a Scrum Master. And that isn't always, it isn't always a role or a position that gets investment, but the coordinating function that this guy has, Sebastian, our Scrum Master, he is so good at seeing the vision across the different pods and see what people are working on, and being able to kind of help us anticipate, if you're going to need to work with that pod next month, they have a couple big projects going on now, so you guys, that probably won't work, so you guys should talk where you need to adjust. Yeah, that's been incredibly helpful.
So how important is pace for you concerning media innovation? Because I have one further question, actually. I've seen a podcast from The Atlantic called Social Distance, I think, and it has a trademark. So did you trademark the term social distance? And does this mean that you've been the first to claim this term for yourself? Is that the right thing I thought I understood?
Could be. I can't say I know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but we definitely have a talented legal team. And whenever we're branding, whenever we're thinking of a brand for a franchise or a podcast or a column or a series that we want to do, we do. I know they're checking kind of any trademark conflicts. So I'm guessing obviously the term social distance and social distancing is part of the common vocabulary now. But I do believe that if any other podcast tried to call itself social distance, we would have a claim that we could make against them, because I do think we at least own that brand in the podcast space.
Okay.
But I don't know so much about how trademark law works, so I shouldn't. Don't take my answer as gospel there.
Yeah, but in a broader perspective, how important is it for products or how important is it to you to be the first to launch a media innovation or to launch a product to find something new?
I would like to say that is something we're always talking about. And I suppose in a way it is. If I'm being honest, like there is value sometimes in being the first mover, the first one to solve a user problem in a good way. But I think, in our discussions, it's a little bit more common for us to talk about differentiators. And, if the Atlantic, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. For example, I'll just give you one example with the Atlantic. Right now on our mobile app, you can save an article and it adds itself to a saved articles list that you can go back to at any time and you can read later. This feature is not currently on our website. So we are talking right now about building the infrastructure that would allow us to sync up those saved articles lists. And that's a feature that's pretty common across many news organizations, and it's low-hanging fruit that we still haven't picked, if you will. So what we talk about is there a way for the Atlantic to build a product experience around saved articles that is different than what other people are doing? So we know we're not innovating and inventing this particular feature of digital media apps, but we do think a lot about how might we do it in a way that is specific to our brand and our brand values and kind of what our readers expect from us. That said, I am, again, as we talked about the organization and kind of the strategic setup at the Atlantic, we also have a group that is focused on kind of taking our biggest ideas from our journalism, from the things we're planning on covering, and turning those into big and net new experiences. So we absolutely have a team and a unit that is quite focused on how can we take this thing that we know we're going to do as an editorial project, as an editorial package, and can we think of things we can build on top of that or extensions of it that meet a need that isn't met in the marketplace right now? So it's definitely part of our thinking. I think for where my team is at right now, we think more about how can we differentiate from our competitors while we're also on another track, kind of thinking about and exploring net new things that we don't see out there. So a little bit of both, but probably weighted on the side of differentiation rather than, complete experimental innovation. Even though that's fun stuff, it just takes a lot of resources. So,
oh yeah, definitely,
it makes a lot more sense for us at this point. We're investing more resources in kind of ensuring that our core product experience is solid and is Atlantic-y and makes sense for our readership.
Yeah, I have a question on that as well, Greg. And let me address the viewers first. Obviously, we got Greg Emerson on today, Executive Director of Product at The Atlantic. But you can ask almost anything, Greg, right? And we don't know if he answers everything. But please, viewers, if you do have any questions about product or about The Atlantic, please do put them in the chat and we'll read them and see if Greg can answer them. Greg, going back to what you said earlier, I think you did a Nieman Lab 2020 prediction on the UX of the mobile news apps, right? And there was, I think, a couple of weeks ago on Medium was a heavily shared post on someone who compared news apps to, I don't know, Netflix or maybe Uber, and that the UX wasn't up to par. And people said, well, it's not you can't sort of make that equivalent, but it had some sense. So what is your biggest issue nowadays with news apps, or as you said with the Atlantic, we're going to see to make our product just work and fine tune?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was writing that piece, it was really aspirational for me too, about thinking about all the amazing things that a mobile device can do, and as well as like the way that people use a mobile device that's in their pocket all day, every day, versus how they use other platforms, because it's quite different. So, fundamentally, what I see, I see a lot of news apps just kind of recreating this homepage experience. And not to say that that's a bad thing specifically, but it's really hard to communicate the same like visual weight and editorial weight for different items on a mobile homepage as you would on a desktop homepage. With more real estate, you can play with vertical position or horizontal position or the size of each module. But when you're in a single column view, you can't really do that so much. What I really love about the Atlantic's app, one of the many things I really love about the Atlantic's app, and I can't take credit for this one because that came from the brilliant minds that preceded me, but the main screen of our mobile app is kind of written like a newsletter. It's very narrative. We have a specific editor. We have a few editors, and they sign every day. They sign off who wrote this report, who put this kind of collection of stuff together. And it definitely meets a different need where it's very much oriented toward, if you're going to pick up the app and look at it once a day, for example, if it's just part of your morning routine or your evening routine, you will see a curated list of things that the Atlantic has to say today. It is not trying to be a constantly updated homepage with, new stories. Every time a new story is published or goes on the homepage, it goes on the app. It's not like that. It's a very curated and thoughtful experience. And, while the mobile app gets a lot of repeat usage, no users look at it as much as we do. And so I think, there's this trend or habit among journalists where, since we're looking at our products many times a day, there's this idea that it always has to be fresh. It always has to be new. It always has to be updated. We update that today screen twice a day. And, if there are more, not breaking news, because the Atlantic, we're more of an ideas-driven publication. We cover the news of the day, but only when we're able to put a thoughtful, ideas-driven piece together about it. So there are some times when we'll update the feed between those prescribed times. But what we strive for is just to make it like, if you can only visit once a day, no matter what time of day that is, you will see a curated collection of the best stuff that we have to present that day. And that, to me, is it meets a more immediate need. It's not just another platform to browse a homepage and read articles. It's also a destination where you're not just looking at what's new today, you're looking at what does the Atlantic have to say today. At least that's what our audience is using it as. Now, as soon as I say that, I must also share the fact that we also have a tab right next to that tab in our app that is just our latest stories. It is a reverse chronological list of the last 20 stories, because everyone's habits are different, and most importantly, the same person's habits might be different, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. than they are from 4 in the afternoon to 8 at night, for example. So we want to meet both needs, but the default experience is more of a kind of curated narrative, the friend in your pocket who is telling you kind of what's important today. And I'm quite, I as a consumer of the app, I'm biased, of course, because I oversee the team, but as a consumer of the app, I think it's a really good reading experience and reduces a lot of friction for me from, navigating a list of content and knowing that, a module that's several screens down on your mobile app is actually on the website. It's at the top right. It's maybe something that's more important, but it gets de-emphasized. So when I look at most news apps, I kind of, feel like I have to scroll through the feed before I really choose to read anything, because I want to make sure I can kind of get a sense of what those editorial teams have decided to feature every day.
Yeah.
Do you apply this strategy on all of your products? So newsletter, podcast, etc., everything curated and a one-stop shop?
Not 100%, but we are seeing a lot of success with that. Our main core newsletter, which is the Atlantic Daily, it comes out, as you can imagine, once a day. That one, it has a very loyal audience, and it takes the same approach. It is there are a couple of writers, but it's one main writer, and she signs it every day. So there's a clear relationship with the human being that's pulling this stuff together, and really bringing that curation and that way of stringing together a number of different articles in maybe a paragraph that kind of sums up a couple of related things. I think you have to make that choice where that newsletter, for example, it is designed for someone to not need to click on any link or come read any article on theatlantic.com. We want them to develop a habit with our newsletter writer. We want them to create a habit just of when they check their inbox. That's one of the things that they click on and read. And, we might, in some way, you're sometimes sacrificing click-through, but in the aggregate, people have a habit with the brand. And if they are enjoying reading the intelligently and well-written recap of the day's news, then they're more likely to come to the Atlantic on other platforms just because they already know that we are adding value to their lives. And so if it doesn't have a direct effect on site traffic, it at least has a secondary effect in just, improving that brand loyalty and that habit formation.
And Greg, there we get to this sort of constant battle of maybe qualitative metrics based on maybe qualitative user research. On the other hand, the metrics, the analytics. But before you go into that, we have a very interesting question from one of our viewers. So if I can show it on screen, Bridget asks, I see that back in the day you worked as an emerging technologies editor at Newsday. Can you talk a bit about what the transition from an editorial role to more of a product management role was like? So if you would be able to...
Yeah. That is a great question, because it's a transition that I think a lot more people are making these days. Briefly, my background, I started as a writer and writing freelance features, did some magazine features back in the day. And then, my first jobs were in the newsroom. They were very editorially focused. So at Newsday was kind of the first really management role where I started to get a little bit farther away from the content. I wasn't programming the homepage every day. I was doing plenty of programming shifts too, but my role started to become, I was deputy editor. I reported to the editor in chief. And so it was a bit more of a strategic role. I was working with our social media team to make sure we were looking at trends and looking at the performance of our social posts and improving that, and just kind of bringing A/B testing to our newsletters, for example. I started being involved in more of these projects that were content adjacent, and I really enjoyed that stuff. So at the time, Newsday did not have a dedicated product team. It was, there was a digital side, and that digital side was fairly small when I arrived. I think, 10-ish, maybe even a few maybe even fewer than 10 to 12 possibly. And when I left 3.5 years later, we were at least at 40. So a lot of growth in digital. And of course, that continued after I left. But I was asked to be kind of the point person for a redesign of Newsday's mobile apps. And that was something that our leadership at the time had prioritized, just recognizing that mobile apps were incredibly important. And subscribers had an expectation that there'd be a dedicated mobile experience that they could use. That wasn't just like a replica of the print edition of the newspaper. So I was put in as the editorial lead, as kind of the point person of that app redesign. And that was the first time I really worked closely with engineers and designers and really thinking about how should this feature work. It was
and you didn't do that as more. You didn't do that in the more editorial role. You started doing that more from the product management role.
Exactly. So that editorial role as deputy editor of emerging technologies, that role kind of organically started to transition into more product type work. So, my boss asked me one day, or we were talking about newsletters, and we didn't have a dedicated team around newsletters. We had newsletter products that we built and that were sent out. But we didn't have a team looking at like, are they working? And how do we even measure success? And, is it just open rate, or do you want to look at click through? And so working with someone on my team to be our designated newsletter person, we kind of started just thinking about what questions would we want to answer to know if our newsletters are doing well, if we should keep doing more like that, or if we should change our strategy. So I didn't even know it was product work at the time. And I don't think any of my bosses really even did either. Like I was never told like, this is product work and, this is an area we want to get more into. It was more meeting the needs of the project at the time.
And what year were we talking?
This was 2005, or wait, no, that's a way long time ago. Sorry. It was 2010-ish to 2013-ish. Geez, I can't believe I would probably need to check my LinkedIn to get those dates immediately right. But it was
totally understandable, Craig.
So. Yeah, it was in the early days when news organizations were starting to invest in product. I really liked that work. I really responded to the data-driven parts of it, the analytics of, is this thing working or not? Was our hypothesis correct? That kind of sort of scientific thinking is I'm probably less of a creative and more of an analytical person. And so I just really responded to that kind of organized way of thinking about digital products and measuring if they're working. And I enjoyed Newsday a lot. It was a great team, and I spent 3.5 great years there. But that's when I kind of wanted to transition more directly into a product role. So just having had that experience in a small newsroom that didn't have a product team and that required people to start kind of taking on these bridge roles, which for many smaller organizations today, that's still the case, right? There may not be product support for everything that they want to do in digital. And so frequently people on editorial sides are asked to fill those roles. In any case, I responded very well to the methodology. I went to the Wall Street Journal, which gave me an opportunity to do a product, have a product title and really work directly, managing engineers' work, not managing them directly, but managing their work, managing roadmaps, managing new features. It was a lot of, at that point I realized that there was a lot of formal training in product that I didn't have. I had a fair bit of kind of experience doing product-y things, but while I had read a lot about product work, while I was at the Journal, there were a lot of great product folks I worked with, so I learned a lot from them. I went through a product manager training as well, and kind of helped to shore up my core understanding of what that all looks like. So it became natural after that, growing in the role at the Wall Street Journal and then transitioning to HuffPost. It was all pretty organic and natural. For just one last thing to say to you, Bridget, like the thing that the commonality that I found among all of it is that focus on the reader. Like as a journalist and as an editorial person, you're hopefully always thinking about, are we writing quality? Are we producing quality journalism that is clear to the reader, that's informing them of important things, and hopefully writing topics that audience cares about, writing about topics that audience cares about. And in product management, it's the same thing. You really want to put users at the center of your thinking and make sure that you're building products that users want and building features that users want. And so that common ground kind of helped ground me, right? It's like, just as long as you can come back to the first principles of the reader experience, that helps me get through the rocky bits where my knowledge of product methodology was not as strong as it has become since.
And as you say, and I hope, Bridget, we addressed Greg addressed your question extensively. And but as you said, we didn't even call it product back then. I think in 2 weeks or next week there will be a News Product Alliance Summit, and
yes,
one of the session tracks, one of the sessions is called the ABC of Product, to create a shared vocabulary, because different people explain it in different ways. So you were very early thinking about it, but still it's 2021 and people are still sort of, it's still maturing, I think, as a entity of its own. And I'll put the link in the chat. Right? Yeah. So
I really enjoy that part,
Greg. And I think we still have two items that we do every episode, and that is advice, and the other thing is a live demo. And to share with the audience, just before we went live, something went wrong with the live demo. Should we try it again, or do you want to go to the advice part first?
I think we can try it again, because but you gotta let me know if you can see my screen this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see it, and I can put it on, but we can still see ourselves, so it will be now we see the Google side. And tell us, what are you going to show us, Greg?
Yes, so, and you can see the Atlantic homepage now, yeah?
Yes, it's working.
Fantastic.
Perfectly fine.
Okay, what I wanted to just talk about a little bit today comes from my background as a mobile product person specifically, where it was really important to me to be able to mimic real life conditions that people on their phones would be experiencing when trying to use our app. So I learned about a tool at the time called a network link conditioner. And it's something that allows you to kind of slow down your network artificially to mimic some real world conditions. In the intervening years, it has been built into Chrome as a feature of Google Chrome, which is extremely useful and interesting. So hopefully you'll be able to see my cursor and the menu that I'm opening. But if you go in Chrome in the top right, there's the 3 dots menu. There's an option to select more tools, and then you go down and load your developer tools. Is this showing up as well on the live stream?
Yeah. Can you show it one more time so people can really get where it is?
Yeah. So up here in the top right of the screen, if you look at my little avatar on Chrome, you have the 3 dots menu. And then if you scroll a little bit down, you see this option for more tools. And then in the more tools menu at the bottom, you have something called developer tools. Yeah. So when you load developer tools, it brings you this very technical panel of different elements, different things happening on your page. Most people, or a lot of people, are familiar with this button right here that I'm hovering over that allows you to change the view between a desktop and a mobile device. So that is something pretty common. But what I wanted to talk about today was this network option here. So that's the tool that they have built in. So if you see this network tab in the console, you'll then see a drop-down menu here that says not throttling, no throttling right now. But you can see the different presets for network speeds that you could test on. So you can mimic, and what Google Chrome does, it'll just literally slow down your network artificially so you can see how your page would load in a different context. So
how would you explain throttling, by the way? What does it
throttling imply? The word itself kind of suggests squeezing something.
Okay,
And so the idea is, like, you take your network that has this amount of bandwidth and you just throttle it, you squeeze it so that you're only getting the part below.
Probably,
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, if I switch to the mobile view, and we're on the network tab, and I'm just going to reload the page here, and you see there is no throttling. This is the normal speed of my current internet connection.
Yep.
And you see the components are loading, and down here there's a timer, right? Finish 9.14 seconds. So you can then change it to a fast 3G connection and refresh the page, and then you see how your mobile website will perform for someone with a fast 3G connection. Still gotta, load the same components, and it's still, loading the same scripts. And you can see this one, 10.88 seconds. So not too much slower, but it gets interesting, when you hit slow 3G, and again, refresh your page, and you can already see there's quite a bit more lag. It is having to reload some components. And you can see on the right, all of these things that usually happen in the blink of an eye when you're on a super fast Wi-Fi connection. You can imagine for people who are in more rural areas outside of the city, or maybe just people on old devices that aren't able to handle higher network speeds, you want to see their experience. So it looks like now, we are at around 29 seconds. And it's just, it's important to think about the end user's experience, and it's hard to do that artificially. When I worked at Newsday, I remember I used to go to our print shop. We had the print shop on the same campus where the offices were, and they had terrible reception there. So sometimes when we were building that app, I would have to walk down to the press room, put on a hard hat and goggles, and just try to, load our app and see what happens when there's a slow connection. What you learn is actually really interesting, because, while that things slow down the page, or things slow down your mobile app, whether it's ad calls or analytics calls or things like that, what it helps you do is really estimate the impact of a new feature. So what you can do is, if you have a beta version of your site, let's say we are planning to put some new functionality on our homepage, we would have that set up in a beta environment, and I would be able to load the beta page in my browser, check it on a slower connection, and see if we have improved performance or not improved performance. And this is a topic that's really important to us right now, where we want to make sure page speed and our pages are loading quickly. And one thing that we're all very well aware of is that if it takes too long to load a page, it doesn't matter how great the experience is that you built, because a lot of people just don't have patience for it. So it's just a really good way to check your work, make sure you're doing well on performance, and make sure you're being empathetic to users who are not in major cities with great Wi-Fi connections or the fastest telephones.
So thank you for sharing this tool with us. And then if you do have the Chrome browser already installed, you don't have to install anything else. You can just find the feature and go there. Nadine?
Yeah, I just wanted to say you should come to Germany and test your products here, because our internet is so terrible that you won't even have to use this Chrome feature. But yeah, I mean, today everything is going well, but my 3G isn't working all the time. So maybe next time you can send me the link to your new product. Or
talking about new features, we have another viewer who has a question, and then maybe afterwards we can go into your advice, Greg. And I think then we have to wrap it up. Yeah. I don't know the name, GS. You spoke about The Atlantic is a curated, ideas-driven publication. Is there no need for a more personalized reader's experience? And the second question is, do your users have no need to filter the content or the Atlantic archive themselves and be able to search through the content better? So personalized reader experience and need to filter. Yeah.
I think the modern news reader absolutely has an expectation of some amount of personalization being available to them. So I don't think I'm revealing any company secrets to say that we are looking into personalization. There are so many ways to personalize the experience, and that's the key, right? The key is deciding what the best way for The Atlantic to do that is. Does it mean, curated recommendations for you based on your reading history? Does it mean like presenting you with a list of topics and you can choose the topics you want, and we can, build you a custom home feed or a custom feed based on that? I would say that yes, absolutely, there is a need for people to personalize their experience, because at the end of the day, that's reducing friction. If someone can kind of curate their experience a little bit more, that makes it easier for them to find what they want, and that then gives them a more enjoyable experience. It's also important for us, as it is for many news organizations, to remember that our editorial eye and the curation that we provide is also a huge way we add value. So I don't think we would ever replace our homepage with a entirely personalized homepage, but it's more about thinking about where can we integrate personalized features into our product suite in places that make sense for the reader and places where it adds value. I think the thing about personalization is that it's kind of a power user tool, right? The casual users of your product aren't going to spend too much time personalizing it, and certainly not the ones who don't really have a relationship with you and don't really have a habit of reading your stuff. The Atlantic, while it's a subscription-driven publication, we allow people to read 3 free articles a month. And so there's a lot of people kind of in that tier that maybe haven't decided to buy a subscription yet, but have a casual relationship with us. And we want to make sure that anyone who comes gets a great experience. And knowing that personalization is important, it tends to be important to a segment of the audience rather than the entire user base. And your second question, GS, about searching and the Atlantic's archive is a great one, because the Atlantic has such a deep history. Nadine, you mentioned earlier we were founded in 1857. And wow. Some of the most notable writers and thinkers in American history have published in the Atlantic. And incredibly...
You mean like Waldo Emerson, right?
For example, yeah. Martin Luther King, we published Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail in the pages of the Atlantic, up to even more recently with Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Case for Reparations, which is an incredibly important work that's actually getting a lot of attention these days, because the city of Chicago just announced that they would be paying reparations to Black families. And so we're seeing we always kind of see a lot of interest in our archives. And while our website does have a search experience, we're also looking at better ways to bring our archives forward and allow people to kind of browse and search and seek out the stuff they're interested in. So definitely a relevant question, and something that in the universe of things that we're looking at.
So thank you, GS, for asking this. And Greg, it reminds me of in a way about what you say about the power users, how Spotify came up with their Discover Weekly, because they know it's more about the curated playlist. If it's Friday afternoon, or if you're looking for a workout or a Zen Sunday, that they saw that the power users were putting hours and hours into crafting these playlists, and then they thought, what if we could take the habits or the sort of power usage of these power users and offer that as a service to as an onboarding service or to new users, so they don't have to build it, but they could consume it, which is a very interesting one. And you could see the equivalent for what editors are doing, right? When they decide what to put on the homepage or what is important to you, and where you can build those playlists, reading lists yourselves. Yeah.
I mean, it's a fantastic example. Of course, a song is quite different from a news article. You could listen to your favorite song 1,000 times. You're probably not reading the exact same news article 1,000,000 times, but I totally agree that the inspiration is like spot on with an experience that could work well for news if it's done right. It would be challenging, but you could test your way to something like that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and the catch was that their data science team, they discovered that because they saw the titles of the playlist, and it made sense to them when they sort of looked at their data. Yeah.
Nice.
But we're 45 minutes in, and 54, and it's time for the next segment. We've asked you for advice, and it's called Stop It, Journalists. But obviously, we turn it into more constructive, on a more constructive note. So, Greg, please, what kind of advice do you have to journalists or product managers?
We could talk for another hour on this. So I'll try to.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll try.
Maybe you come back in a year, Greg, and we'll check your status.
If you'll permit me 2 answers. The first one is advice for journalists. The second is advice for like product people in journalism. Although we are also journalists, which is not always understood. But in any case, for journalists, I would say one of the most important things that I see in the mainstream media is the idea that the white man is the default customer, the default point of view that news tends to be written for. There was a great Neiman Lab prediction, I think in 2019, called the year that news organizations realize that not everybody is white. There is so much audience there that does not reflect people like me, people, well-educated white people that grew up on the East Coast. And there's a trend in media of just kind of assuming that that's the default audience, the default lens through which coverage is done. I think a lot of news organizations have woken up to this a bit, but I still see it so much. And I think that kind of inclusion and equal representation is so important. Readers can see right through it. Readers can see when that is an afterthought, and that's incredibly important. That I would want other journalists to know. To give a piece of advice that's a little bit closer to my world, I wanted to just say that, I'm a huge fan of user research and user testing and user interviews. You have to know your user and be empathetic with them. When we have user interviews, I occasionally sit in on them, and it's great to just hear from their mouths what they do. But I would also, I would say stop. I would tell journalists to stop only using qualitative research. Stop relying so much on user interviews. The Atlantic has an amazing user research team, audience research team. It's led by Emily Goligoski, who is a master of the craft. And her team are always very forthright about the fact that, we interviewed a few users. They do not represent a statistically significant amount of our audience. They are also not a random sample of our audience, so take it with a grain of salt. And I think, it's easy to use that kind of audience research and user interviews because it's intuitive, right? It's just, what did people say about our thing? And then, you hear that and you're like, oh, that's a good point. We should change that immediately. So
and they're actual persons, so they're always right. Right.
Yeah. And numbers are hard and math is hard. So that sometimes dissuades people from really digging in on the quantitative stuff, because if you can watch an interview and hear how someone reacted, it feels like just a lot easier to understand and process that. So my constructive advice would be something that I try to do with the research phase of our strategic planning, which is that we look to hit 4 different areas. We look to do a data science, like a deep dive on current user behavior and what we can learn about that to inform a new feature. We look at SEO. So we have a great search or SEO expert on the team, and she's able to just kind of look at trending topics in search and what those searches are leading to among our competitors. And so that, reader needs as expressed through their search queries, super interesting, super valuable insight. And then we do user interviews. So there is that component of qualitative research. And then the fourth is competitive analysis. So, for me, it's really important that we're always using a blend of these inputs. And, I see a lot of examples, or when people are talking about product work and user-centered design and just user-centered thinking, empathy with the user is incredibly important, but you got to remember that like one person saying something to an interviewer about how they use the product is very different from a lot of people's actual behavior. So I try to, place greater weight on not just what they say, but what we see them doing. And it's changed kind of the way I see the research and planning phase of strategy, and it's been valuable for me. So I would pass along that advice to anyone in the field.
Well, 2 good pieces of advice. Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you for joining us today. If people want to ask you questions afterwards, where should they go?
Yeah, realize I certainly, I love talking about this stuff. So as you can probably tell, but that also means I love to engage with these topics outside of live streams. So I'm probably most active on Twitter, but I would say Twitter or LinkedIn are kind of the places where I play. As I said before, like I'm not as much of a I I don't use Instagram nearly as much as I should. I know Instagram is kind of the place where everybody is, but other than occasional pictures of my dog, like I just don't feel like I don't take many pictures. That's just not the way I work. So I'm a little bit more of a words and numbers guy.
Especially nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Greg, thank you very much for joining us today, and Nadine, thank you too, and obviously
thank you so much.
For having me.
The viewers, thank you for joining us today and asking these questions. And please, obviously, you have to subscribe. Don't forget. And we'll tell you a bit later on in a couple of weeks who our next guest will be. But for now, we've touched upon 60 minutes. So let's say goodbye and see you next time. And thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank
and
you.
Really happy to chat with you guys. Have a good afternoon.